It is a prime ingredient, feeding the fires of imagination. In eons past, it fanned flames ignited by a primeval author, chiseling random petroglyphs across a dim cave wall. This life-giving breeze once grew papyrus for paper and dried vibrant oils brushed over canvas. Carried across the land since the dawn of time, it once breathed life into dinosaurs and has since walked on the surface of the moon. Manifesting as a gentle zephyr, it stirs memories of childhood, or as a raging vortex ripping up the pages of history. Powered by this influence, we dream, love, laugh, hate, and destroy. In short, live out our lives. A gust of this tempest carries the power to scatter fog surrounding the unknown. Drifting through frequencies of time and space, thin air is inhaled for the first time and exhaled at the last. Don't try to catch your breath.
I could hear the police sirens. They're about 13 stories down to be exact, and approaching from several blocks away. "Too late," I whispered aloud. "Time is of the essence, my intrepid federales, and your time is fleeting. When the tires come to a screeching halt and the guns are drawn, the deed will already have been done. And I'll be tooling into the sunset. To quote Hans Gruber, earning 20%. More or less, that is. The deed, I should point out, my little caper currently in progress, is an honest-to-God bank heist that might go down in the annals of crime legend as the greatest single theft in the history of the sport. No rubber masks, no vaults, no bank tellers pissing themselves from behind a plane of bulletproof glass. My worthy predecessors put all that effort into the job, and the takeaway was sadly lacking, at least in comparison to my newfound windfall. The 500 billion clams of Bitcoin cryptocurrency that was now transferred to an anonymous, securely encrypted account, to which I alone possess the key. With a pleasant electronic chime from the terminal before me, my little fishing expedition was complete, and I was out the exquisitely ornate revolving door, according to the timer on my Apple Watch, 15 seconds sooner than expected. Of course, the incredible efficiency of all of this is due in no small part to my skills as a consummate hacker. Oh, thank you very much. All modesty aside, I managed to circumvent the cameras and laser trip lines using the guest Wi-Fi in the bank building. Too easy. Then I forged myself a level prime security badge, granting access to the Global Asset Bank's server farm, where I pwned the countermeasures, snuffed out the firewall, and proceeded to, make a significant withdrawal, shall we say? Layman's terms, of course. No sense boring you with tiresome bullet points. Long story short, I was back in my Tesla and tear-assing out of town without so much as a carbon footprint left behind in my wake.
Respectfully submitted for your disapproval, Gideon Jeffries, Eternity 373RN17Y in Leetspeak. To the few friends he has, a high-tech, 2-bit criminal, whose record up till now has remained relatively spotless. Spotless only by way of a skill set learned out of life's sheer boredom, and now put to work, as they say, for evil rather than for good. You see, Gideon has no real need for the incredible wealth he has just now bestowed upon himself. He steals because he can, because the act offers his empty soul yet another cheap thrill in a long list of questionable activities spanning a wasted lifetime. By way of his considerable knowledge and expertise, lives have been destroyed, fortunes lost, and the dark blight of chaos and anarchy allowed to gain yet another foothold. Gideon Jeffries, a gifted, albeit horrifically twisted member of society, on his way to the ultimate destination, a metaphoric bed of his own making, where the darkness of his deeds proved to be the noxious vapor of thin air that fans his own personal inferno.
The meandering series of state routes and two-lane pothole-scarred asphalt roadways were certainly less than ideal thoroughfares to provide an expedient departure from the scene of the crime. Cursing my GPS for leading me out here, I found myself cringing with each bump, bang, or nail-biting scratch inflicted on the once pristine exterior of my Tesla Model S. You know, considering my lucrative business transaction that just concluded a short while ago, I suppose it could be considered petty of me to fret about a few door dings on a car I planned to deep six at my final destination. Amused, I stared up into the rearview mirror and laughed at that worried expression. Lighten up, Gideon, with your nail-biting OCD. Since when has a getaway car ever escaped without a scratch? Deciding to drown out the impact of the debris that was busy transforming my $70,000 ride into a rolling piece of junk, I queued up some wicked death metal on my favorite playlist and focused all my attention on the road ahead. As it turns out, just in the nick of time to veer onto the shoulder and avoid slamming headlong into what looked to be, at least at a fleeting glance, a hulking black goat standing across the solid yellow line. My spur-of-the-moment, knee-jerk reaction kept me from rolling out a roadkill pancake, but it didn't end well. My Tesla slammed into a guardrail and careened out into the blackness beyond, said blackness being a 50-foot drop into a stinking, stagnant waterhole. The car slapped down on the slime-caked surface of the bog with a sloppy, metallic belly flop. Enough of a jolt to whip my forehead straight into the steering wheel, just a microsecond before the airbag deployed. As I sat there struggling to unbuckle the safety restraint, a steady stream of blood clouded over my eyesight in a crimson haze. I saw that the dashboard glass was fragmented and a thick green ooze was pouring in and threatening to drag me down in the undertow. Momentarily traumatized by injury that was evidently superficial, I scrambled out from under the deflated airbag and up from the driver's seat that was now completely submerged in that foul-smelling water. Ironically, the heart and soul of my Model S, the electrical system, had sparked out of service, rendering the side window dead on arrival. Mustering an adrenaline-powered burst of superhuman strength, I gave that fractured glass a good solid kick, sending shards of glittering fragments like buckshot into the murky gloom outside. Not missing a step, I scrambled out through the opening, diving through the door frame into the quagmire that was rapidly swallowing up my only means of escape. As soon as my arms and legs hit the water, I started treading, only to discover that the tangled mass beneath the surface was so dense that I could nearly stand upright on it like slippery green mud. Sloshing ankle-deep to the nearest shoreline, I stumbled up on solid ground and collapsed into the tangled bramble. Even as I was laying there, stressed out and completely exhausted, my mind was already reeling through alternate courses of action, limited though they may be. Without so much as a weary, sideways glance, I started entertaining the notion of growing a thick, scraggly beard and cohabitating here with the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, I snarled. Go find a cave somewhere, live off leaves and berries until the statute of limitations is up and the feds just stop looking. I remember a Twilight Zone episode that seemed eerily reminiscent of my current situation. Some bad guys had pulled off a heist and then put themselves to sleep in a cave over 100 years or so, long enough that the law stopped looking for them. Sadly, suspended animation didn't exactly figure into my grand design. No matter, things didn't work out well for them in the end either. All at once, the gnashing gears and cogs of my fevered brain seized up, like a wrench in the works, like a fly in the ointment, like a hitch in my giddy-up. Yeah, you get the picture. Anyway, that sideways glance I mentioned before revealed something strangely unexpected. Out beyond a thick strand of timber was some kind of brilliant light source. Uncharacteristic and out of place, even deeper in this desolate landscape. Far too bright for moonlight, I thought. Well, all my dumbass ideas for self-induced witness protection faded to background noise as I tried to focus my gaze past the silhouetted tree line, several yards distant from the gnarled branches. What the hell? I muttered. Suddenly fearful that the long arm of the law had somehow managed to extend itself here, I stood and quietly closed the gap to get a better look at what I was up against. Get a hold of yourself, man. This is probably nothing. A roadside billboard or something. Still thinking about the Twilight Zone, I even thought, hell, maybe I'm already dead, laying in the front seat of the Tesla, impaled on the steering column. What is it? What did they tell you when the ticker stops and you're a buzzard buffet? Right. Go into the light, you dumb bastard. That's what I did, all right, tiptoeing over the crackling limbs and rustling clumps of wet grass until finally I stood concealed, peeking out at the light source. I'll be damned. Straightening up, I stepped out into an open clearing. A phone booth. The light was coming from one of those old pre-cellular public phones, for some reason parked clear out here in the sticks. Thoughts of imminent capture no longer a concern, I started walking toward the ancient icon, wondering why they would even bother laying a power cable this far out. Not to mention leaving the lights on. I mean, who uses a phone booth anymore when you've got a... Oh, no. My murmuring trailed off to silent panic as I realized that my cell was mounted on the dashboard of my Model S, most likely resting in peace 6 feet under a layer of putrid goo. Oh, that's just priceless, I shouted. My options quickly dwindling, I went all old school and stepped up to the open door of the dingy glass cubicle and peered inside. From what I could remember, everything seemed to be in order, not like I needed an owner's manual. I mean, it's still a phone, old as Moses, and by no means mobile, but hey, I'm a smart guy. I could still work things out. Stepping inside, I reached out and pulled the receiver off the hook and held it against my ear. Jackpot. There was a dial tone. Somewhere on the edges of my peripheral vision, I registered a folding door sliding shut behind me. Oh well, no worries. I'm not claustrophobic. Okay, Gideon, step 2. The most likely candidate to get me the hell out of here. Judging by the technology, or apparent lack of, it might be prudent to keep the co-conspirators off my short list of contacts. Putting a trace on this dinosaur was probably child's play. I needed someone with little or no knowledge of the plan. Need to know, Jeffries. Compartmentalize and call yourself a cab. Course of action decided, I pressed the big, tarnished silver 0 button and waited. The ringtone sounded tinny and distant from a crusty old speaker, but certainly loud enough for a brief conversation. There was a sharp, staticky click as the call was connected, and then a woman's voice.
Operator, how may I direct your call?
Yeah, hey, operator, I need a cab company. Doesn't matter which, just someplace in or around Baton Rouge. I expected to hear a prompt reply, but when none came, I felt the need to repeat myself, concerned that perhaps the microphone was defective. Operator, I need a cab. Car trouble. Any service will do. Hello? Hello? Crackling static and no response was disappointing, but then there was something else, difficult to put into words. A looming sense of ambient dread. Interspersed in the background noise, I could swear I heard screams, tortured voices crying out in seeming agony. I suppose the sound could have been overlapping signals, maybe from another call altogether. Maybe wires crossed on the phone pole somewhere? Regardless, I put the receiver back on the hook and tried to back away only an inch or two before I was blocked against the door. The entire phone booth rattled from the impact, and as a result, a small, age-stained index card fell from somewhere on the top of the coin slot to drift end over end and land face up on the floor. It read, "Out of order." Well, that's it, I suppose. Time to get back up to the road and hitch a ride. Figuring that the whole of this utility had long since seen better days, I yanked on the grungy door handle and then kicked the rusted hinges to the folded position, granting me the exit. As I stomped back to the direction of my sunken Tesla, a funny thing happened. The phone started ringing. Unnerved, I stopped and stood at the edge of the clearing, trying to decide whether to answer it or take my chances thumbing a lift. Considering I hadn't seen another car for miles on the way so far, I reversed course back to the phone booth. As before, occupancy apparently required that the door be shut to reduce background noise for the call, I suppose. Bullfrogs and chirping crickets, hardly noise pollution, but of course, my immediate attention was on the call. Once again, lifting the receiver to my ear, I was relieved to hear the voice of the operator again.
This is the operator speaking. I have a collect call from the idolatrous cab company. Will you accept the charges?
Charges? Operator, what charges? Once again, bizarre, distorted, overlapping hisses and buzzing sounds. Weird tones, static, and underneath it all, a horrible, unearthly cacophony of nightmarish torment. Finally, the operator's voice broke into the mind-numbing signal.
Please deposit 75 cents for the first 5 minutes.
And that was it. Panic rapidly welling up inside my head, I rifled through every pocket in my coat and pants for some spare change, knowing already that it's been years since I've carried either coin or currency on my person. I'd sell my soul for a quarter right now. Billions in bit currency and not a coin to my name. I shouted, "Brother, can you spare a dime?" I slammed the receiver back down on the hook, turning awkwardly in the confined space. I reached out to the door handle and gave it an angry tug, intent on doing my worst to wrench the folding entry off its ever-loving hinges. The damn thing didn't move an inch. I started wondering whether any of this was even real. Some kind of fevered nightmare as I lay buckled in and dying at the bottom of a rotting sinkhole. A broken telephone calling out to me in the middle of nowhere. Unearthly voices crying and screaming in agony from the other end of some kind of messed up party line. And now this, incarcerated inside a dilapidated glass chamber of horrors. Pounding and kicking with all my strength, I almost rocked the phone booth free of its foundation. Realizing that tipping this thing to a reclining position would turn the booth into an uncanny resemblance of a glass coffin. I abruptly ended my struggle and slid down to a fetal position on the cold concrete floor, more pissed off than frightened and momentarily resigned. Crouched there waiting for my next bright idea, I noticed some sort of movement in the shadows next to me. As I focused my gaze onto the dim halo of light from above, I saw a dead rat, for the most part decomposed to a skeleton state, save the lifeless head and neck, rippling and animated by mounds of squirming maggots. A wave of nausea propelled me back to my feet, and I set off on yet another adrenaline-fueled frenzy. As I stood there futilely pounding away, I remembered that old cliché. You know the one. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, did it make a noise? Letting my arms fall, I sighed, "To hell with it." Almost as if on cue, the telephone started ringing again. Out of ideas and frustratingly desperate, I lifted the receiver to my ear. "Yeah, hello?" I said in a broken sing-song tone, my voice raw from all the shouting. The response was immediate, the same operator as before, though this time she seemed far more forceful and direct.
Hello, Gideon Jeffries. I have a collect call from Louie, your cab driver. Will you accept the charges?
Dumbfounded, I responded, "Wait, what? A collect call from who? Hold on, how do you know my name? Who the hell is this? I told you before, lady, I'm penniless. I can't pay for the call." There was a moment of tense silence. Then she said,
A simple yes or no will suffice, Mr. Jeffries. Please, just answer the question.
Disbelievingly, I contemplated what she was asking for. Always a cynic and a dark sense of humor, I formulated a safe response. "So sorry, operator," I fired back. "No change. Why don't you help me get out of here, and I'll scuba dive down to the Tesla. Maybe there's a coin or two under the seat."
Sarcasm won't get you out of your predicament, Gideon. Do you need a way out or not?
I guess you could say she had me dead to rights. I needed an escape, and here it was, calling me back on my own personal antique phone booth. You know, I don't remember giving out my name, but at this point, who cares, right? Sure, why not? "Yes, operator, I accept the charges."
That's fine, Mr. Jeffries. Thank you for your cooperation.
There was a slight click, apparently connecting me to my caller. Then the operator said,
Go ahead, Louis. Your party's on the line.
I swear I heard that same pitiful wailing in the distant background in the moments before the connection was established, but sadly didn't heed any kind of warning, implied or otherwise.
"Hello, Gideon. Louis here. Having a little car trouble this evening, I hear. No worries, my friend. I've got you covered. Looks like your payment went through just fine. I'm already en route. Should be at your location inside of 5 minutes or so. Just sit tight."
An odd mix of trepidation and relief had me wishing more than ever for a plan B, a second option from a dire prognosis, though nothing presented itself. Thanks, Louis. At the moment, I seem to be at your mercy."
Indeed you are, Gideon. Soon you'll be on a one-way ride out of this situation. Take a long look around, Mr. Jeffries. You won't ever be passing this way again.
Unnerved, I replied, "Something tells me that the fare I just paid you isn't going to get me anywhere I actually want to go." I heard Louis scoff.
Want to or not, you've been diligently working your way there for some time now. This last little caper of yours has effectively guaranteed you a membership to what I like to refer to as our Circle 4 Club. Very exclusive. And, I might add, reserved for a select few such as yourself. Like-minded individuals with a driving desire to succeed in the collection and possession of monetary gain. You were going to get there sooner or later. Turns out sooner after all. So, you need a lift. You paid for it. Dearly. I'm coming to, shall I say, collect. Sit tight, Gideon. I'll be there shortly.
There was another sharp click, and then the telltale dial tone signaling the call had ended. As I lowered the receiver and let it dangle from the cord, still clinched tightly in my fist, I looked up and noticed another light in the forest. This time, the unmistakable flashing strobes mounted above the cab of an EMT truck, soon accompanied by a pair of state troopers, and a tow truck equipped with a winch. All of said commotion centered around the smashed guardrail and the point of impact of my Model S. As I watched on at the bizarre scene unfolding before me, I suddenly realized what had happened. For that matter, what was about to happen, just as soon as Louis arrives. At the end of the winch cable, slowly emerging out of the muck, was my Tesla. Yours truly, still buckled in and as dead as that rat on the floor at my feet. Knowingly, I started whistling the theme from the Twilight Zone. Right before I heard the folding door of the phone booth sliding smoothly open behind me. As I turned toward the exit, I found myself standing face to face with none other than the devil himself.
"Mr. Jeffries, it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance,"
he said, extending a gnarled talon. Reaching out and shaking it, I raised a knowing eyebrow. "Louis?" I asked. The abomination nodded, and one of his long, curved horns clicked against the doorframe.
"Lucifer, at your service."
Lyrics from Double Agent, a song written and recorded by Canadian progressive rock trio, Rush. The known and the nameless, familiar and faceless, my angels and my demons at war. Which one will lose depends on what I choose, or maybe which voice I ignore. Gideon chose to ignore every other voice, save the one that called to him from the other end of a telephone line. A line by the roadside, the connection, tapped into a dark, unknown detour, straight to the afterlife. You could chalk it up as a wrong number, or perhaps a crank call to a forgotten phone booth somewhere. Then again, there's the matter of an abandoned Tesla automobile, dredged up from a bog, and the aforementioned corpse in the driver's seat. Telltale signs of a life that was clearly marked, wrong way, do not enter. Gideon Jeffries. Case closed. Case file opened, and a soul gone missing, having somehow escaped into thin air. Episode 8 of the Thin Air podcast anthology, Collect Call, a 2021 Thin Air Halloween special, was written, produced, directed, and told by R.J. Lonsdale. The voice of Gideon Jeffries was performed by Mark W. Wood. The voice of Louis was performed by Kevin Wittenberg, and the voice of the telephone operator was performed by Nancy Wood. Audio production for all Thin Air episodes by Mark W. Wood of Wood Media Studio, Incorporated. Music compositions used in this episode include Mysterious City and Silent Alarm, The Devil's Grunge, and Bolts of Frightening by Mark W. Wood. This has been an R.J. Lonsdale Flyby Studios presentation.